Hi guys, welcome to the fifth lecture series of Java server pages. As we know that already we discussed about introduction to Java server pages, followed by anatomy of JSP page, JSP processing, declarations, directives and expressions. All put together we discussed in the earlier 4 lecture series of JSP. Now in this lecture session we are going to deal about code snippets where we see about or under the section called as JSTL in short, whereas the expansion of acronym is Java Server Pages Standard Tag Library and JSP Implicit Objects. If you have not gone through the basics of JSP, kindly please refer the earlier lecture series. That is, at least you should have the basics of JSP. If you learned already, then it becomes very easy for us to proceed further in this lecture notes. In the first lecture notes, in the home page of the JSP lecture series itself, we have given the references and the objective, what we are going to deal, everything. And now in this lecture series we are going to deal about code snippets and implicit objects. As the acronym JSTL stands for Java Server Pages Standard Tag Library, it is a set of useful tags to simplify the JSP development. It has more inbuilt useful tags and also as well as customized tags by the user based on the requirements. Further, it provides tags to control the JSP in much more scenarios. Say call it as first page behavior, how the page behaves. Through this we can able to determine how the page should behave, then the iteration, then how many iterations a particular routine has to be done or a particular process has to be repeated, along with the control statements where until the requirements is met, this has to be met or this a certain set of process has to be repeated. Say call it as until you are requested to provide a new password which consists of or which should consist of small letters, uppercase letters, special cases and special characters followed by some numbers. If while you are prompted to provide a password with all sort of options, then using this JSTL, that is Java Server Pages Standard Tag Libraries, it is very easy for us to iterate and control the statements such that the page behavior can be monitored. That's what we want to represent here. The JSP provides tag to control the JSP page behavior, iteration and control statements, internationalization tags and SQL tags. Apart from that, it is a part of Java EE API and included in most of the servlet containers. Here Java EE stands for that J2EE they will call, or J2EE we will represent, that is EE stands for Enterprise Edition, where it can be used for a small sort of applications, web-based applications or much more higher end web-based applications you can go for it. That's what that Enterprise Edition represents. Apart from that, this JSTL has 5 groups, namely first one is core tag, second one is SQL tag, third one is XML tag, fourth one is internationalization tag, and the last one is functions tag. These are the 5 groups of inbuilt 5 groups of JSTL. We will see one very basic example in the following statement. That is, in the code shown below, it has 4 lines. It consists of simple loop coded with JSTL. Without any tag library or tags, we can write the counterpart with scriptlets that contain Java code in it. There are 2 ways in which you can write the JSTL. One is internal, other one is external snippets. Internal snippets means in the as usual Java code itself we can incorporate the JSTL tags. If not, you can have external JSTL tags, and whenever required you can call those JSTL into our code based on the requirements. That's what. that is without any tag or libraries. That's what this line represents. Without any tag, library or tags, we can write the counterpart code with scriptlets that contain Java code in it. That is, this is the example for integrating JSTL into the actual Java code. That's what we represent it as internal. On the other hand, that is the second type, but the external tag libraries provide more simple and useful capabilities too. This is the second one. That is, you can have the JSTL as a secondary part and you can call whenever required. That is, the advantage of Java applies here. WORA is right there, right? WORA, write once and read any number of times. Likewise, we can do more with writing less. That is the advantage of having JSTL. You just see the coding here. Actually, there are 4 lines of code here. First line represents the tag library along with a URI, and the corresponding prefix. This is what the tag library represents. Here, just this is what we are representing in first line. Whereas from second line, third line and fourth line, that is line number between 2 and 4, what we are doing is just we are using a for each function, for each looping statement such that it iterates from 5 to 10. That is, a variable number is assigned the value 5, that is beginning 5 and ending at 10. That is, you printing that variable's value. As we know that, see here, out object you are using the corresponding value equal to, we are printing the variable number here. For just if you want to print the variable number, accordingly the dollar symbol we are using it here, as we stated already in JSP notations. Wherever you are using the dollar symbol, it represents the variable's value has to be printed accordingly. See here the C, prefix C started here and prefix C the corresponding tag end, and also as well as for loop started here and for loop end here. That is for loop. Inside the for loop, just we are initializing a variable with a value 5 and we are iterating in from 5 to 10. That's what this tag library it says. That is, this we call it as code snippets or JSP snippets, or generally in short we call it as code snippets. That is, there are 2 types. One is internal or external. Internal means we can write the counterpart code with the scriptlets that contain Java code in it, as we already stated. This is what we call it as internal code snippets. Whereas if we can keep this as an external file. That's what the next line represents. But external tag libraries provide more simple and useful capabilities too. That's what they are representing. Even we can have the tag libraries as external part, but the main advantage of having the internal and external code snippets, or we can do more with less writing. That is the advantage of having code snippets. This is what. Now we are moving to JSP implicit objects. JSP implicit objects. These objects are created by JSP engine during the translation phase. That is, while translating the JSP to servlet, these objects are created. That is, these objects are created by JSP engine. JSP engine is the responsible person or responsible environment where this JSP implicit objects are being created. When it is being created? During the translation phase. When the translation, or what is the need for translation? That is, translating the JSP code into servlet code. These are mostly means actually these are being created inside the service method, so we can directly use them within the scriptlet without either initializing or declaring them. Since already we know that now it is the time to recall or recollect the life cycle of a servlet. What is the life cycle of a servlet? Consists of init function is there. First one is init function, second one is service, and third one is destroy. Likewise, even JSP also has JSP init, JSP service, and destroy, right? Likewise, here, since all these objects, when these objects are created by JSP engine during the translation phase, and that too inside the service function, these objects are being created and being accessed. So since because it is being accessed inside the service function, there is no need of initializing or declaring them explicitly. Now we will be seeing 9 implicit objects available in JSP in this section. See here, the 9 implicit objects and their corresponding classes are listed in the following table. The first row represents the out object, which is responsible for the corresponding class is JSP writer. javax.servlet.jsp.jsp writer. So please note down here the convention of Java is implemented here. If the first letter of the first word and if the first letter of the second word is in uppercase, then it represents the inbuilt class. See here, JSP writer is an inbuilt class. It resides in JSP package and another subpackage called as Servlet. Since we are all dealing with advanced concepts of Java, so instead of Java, we'll be dealing with Java X package. Inside Java X package and another package, subpackage called as Servlet. Within the Servlet subpackage called as JSP. Inside JSP, we are having inbuilt class called as JSP writer. So the corresponding implicit object for JSP writer class is out. Similarly, moving to the second row, that is second implicit object called as request. javax.servlet.http http servlet request. If you are noting it down here, the name of the class is http servlet request. The first letter of the first word, first letter of the second word, and first letter of the third word, http servlet request. All are capitalized in accordance with the Java notation for inbuilt class. For this class, the corresponding object is request. Similarly, the third row, http servlet response, is a class name and the corresponding object is response. Coming back to the fourth row, that is fourth line, http session. As already we stated that session, how we can define the session? It is a stipulated period of time when the user logs in and user logs out. That is the time elapsed between the user login and log out. For example, I am logging in at 10 o'clock and log out at 10:02. So the time elapsed between the login and log out, or when I am logging in 10 o'clock, when I am logging out 10:02, that is 2 minutes. So the duration is 2 minutes. Accordingly, this is set to, yes, we call it as session. To maintain that sessions, the corresponding class is used, http session. It resides in the subpackage of http, intern the servlet, intern javax. That is, the reversely I said, in the hierarchy, if you are representing means inside the javax package, servlet, inside the servlet, http, inside the http session is the inbuilt class. So the corresponding object for this http session is session object. Then coming back to that fifth line, that is fifth row, servlet context, that is corresponding application. If you want to maintain a variable between the pages of a particular application, that is, if an application has 10 pages, whatever may be the application, say call it as I am preparing a attendance software, it consists of 10 web pages. I am preparing a application exclusively for project management, or if I'm creating an application for entire college management or school management, whatever may be the case, for all the pages, say call it as n, a particular application has n pages, n web pages. If I want to share a variable between all the n web pages in an application, then I need to deal with servlet context, that is application object. Coming to the sixth line, that is sixth object called as exception. JSP exception. Please note down here this JSP exception, J alone is in uppercase and exception EE is in uppercase. The class notation is being monitored. While writing, please make a note of it that JSP should not be uppercase, J alone is uppercase. The usual Java notation is followed while writing the classes, inbuilt classes. JSP exception. For this class, the inbuilt implicit object referred is exception. As we all know that when we will get the exception, or how we can define the exception is defined as a runtime errors. We may not be knowing what might be the error during the runtime, so that has to be caught. Instead of making or putting the user in trouble, so we want to handle it and safely we need to inform to the user stating that due to this reason this error was happened. If we are not handling those exceptions, then user will be in panic. So to avoid the panic of the user, or instead of making the user in troublesome way, so we need to handle those exceptions. For that, this exception object, implicit object, is used. Coming to the seventh object called as java.lang.object. See here, all the packages which we discussed earlier, 6 objects as of now: out, request, response, session, application, and exception. Now we are dealing with 7th object called as page, which resides in normal sorry which resides in java.lang.object. This is responsible for this page object is responsible for referring the current servlet instances, the current page which is in active, or the current page which is being accessed is said to be as page. For the activating or for processing the current reference to the current object or current page, we will be using this object. Then the eighth implicit object is called as page context, which resides in javax.servlet.jsp.pageContext. This is mainly used for accessing the page or else the request or application or session attributes. For referring the current page, where else, from where I'm getting the data, from either from this page, what else are variables we need to share to the remaining pages, and the session, whether this page should have some common variables between the pages or not. All will be discussed with respect to this object. Then config, it is responsible for representing the servlet configuration object and mainly used for accessing the configuration information such as servlet context, or what is the servlet name, or that we call it as name of the servlet, or configuration parameters. All this we'll be dealing. These are the very brief overview of the corresponding objects. Now we'll be dealing in some more detail about those objects. The very first one, out object. The first one is out object. Out object, the corresponding class responsible class is JSP writer. Already we saw it here. The corresponding object what we are discussing here is out, and that too for out JSP writer. For request, HTTP servlet request. For response, HTTP servlet response. For session, HTTP session. Then for application, corresponding servlet context. For exception, JSP exception. Then for page, it is object. Then page context, again the page context class. For config, servlet config class. Now we will be dealing some more detail with respect to those implicit objects. First and foremost thing is out. This is mainly used for writing the content to the client. Mainly this out object is used for writing the content to the client, that means to the browser. It has several methods which can be used for properly formatting the outputs. That is, if you want to format the output, either for example out.print is there. Out.println means accordingly that whenever it is going to print a content, it will start from the new line, such that the formatting we are doing it. Formatting you can do along with the HTML. Since we are integrating Java code into HTML, you can do the formatting with the help of HTML also. No necessary to deal with out. If you want to do it through JSP, you can do it. That's what this is mainly used for writing the content to the client through the browser. That is, we call it as out object. Yes. Coming to the second object called as request. That is request. It is an implicit object. Out is the main purpose of the request implicit object is to get data on the JSP page where the user interacts with. As we all know that here, one point we need to remember or recall here with respect to the definition of client and a server. How we can define the client? Which always requests. How we can define the server? Which always responds. One more thing we need to remember here, client cannot always be a client, and also as well as server cannot always be a server. To summarize it, the machine can act as both client and also as well as a server, and vice versa. That means a machine which requests some data is always said to be as client. For that particular request, which machine is responsible or which is intended to serve it, or which is responsible for servicing it, we call it as server. Here the request, from where the request arises? From the client machine, where the user sits, where the user is typing something else for requesting. Say call it as, for example, you are typing google.com or you are typing gmail.com. Whenever you type gmail.com in the browser in URL and pressing the enter key, the request is sent from the client's machine, that is from the client's machine's browser, to the corresponding server where it resides. This is what we call it as request. The main purpose of the request implicit object is to get the data on the JSP page which has been entered by the user. Either it may be on the user or else on the previous page. Either it need not be a JSP page, it can be a HTML page from there. Whereas from that page it has to be fetched and it deals with the corresponding it has to deal with the corresponding JSP page which is responsible for servicing it. Right. For example, here, when dealing with login and sign up forms in JSP, we often prompt user to fill those details, call it as username, password. Either this is for after sign in or for logging in. For signing in, you will be asking first name, middle name, last name, then your password, retype password, your date of birth, street address, mobile number, all those things we will be fetching from the client machine. In those scenarios we will be using request objects. That's what we are referring here. This object is then used to get those details entered by the user. Either it may be HTML or even JSP, right, for validation. Whether it doesn't deal with, for validation we are using this, but it doesn't mean for validation, for fetching the data from the client and giving back to the other file for further processing. That is said to be as request. Then response, third implicit object is called as response. It is basically used for modifying or dealing with a response which is being sent to the client. Here response, as already we stated that response is how we can define the server, that is which response for a client request. So based on the client request, server has to do some processing. After processing, the data has to be sent to the client. After the processing, I am repeating, after processing by the server, the client's request, based on the client request, server has to process. After processing, the data has to be sent back to the client again. For that, the response object, this third object, is useful. It is basically used for modifying or dealing with a response which is being sent to the client, where the client, either the client may be working with a mobile phone or else a tab or else with a computer or else a laptop, whatever may be the access. But accordingly, if everywhere else, for example, you are checking your results, you are writing or you have written online exam, and online exam, after that you are seeing the results. Either you can see the result using mobile phone or a tab or a laptop or a desktop, that is PC. Wherever, whatever you are using it and wherever you are working on it, you need to access through any of the browser, right? From that, that's what in everywhere else the client means the browser is given within the brackets, right? After processing the client's request, server responds to the corresponding client. This is what we call it as, this is happening through this response object. Then moving to the next object called as session. That is, it is most frequently used implicit object which is used for storing the user's data to make available on JSP page till the user session is active. Thus already we defined the term called as session. In what way we can define the session, or what is mean by session? A time elapsed between the login and logout. To very simply, or in very simple statement, you are logging into the Gmail. Already the example I said, you are logging into your Gmail account at 10 o'clock and signing out at 10 o'clock 5 minutes, 10:05. That means your session duration is 5 minutes. This is example 1. Moving to the example number 2, you are logging into your online transaction, bank transaction, say call it any of the bank transaction. You are logging in at 10:30 and you are checking your bank balance or something you are doing, and either checking or downloading the last 3 months transactions, and you are signing out at 10:36. That is signing in at 10:30 and signing out at 10:36. In this example, the session duration is 6 minutes. That is logout time minus login time. That's what we call it as session. If you want to make the user's data available between the pages, say another example I'll tell you. You are logging into your Gmail account. Once you logged into your Gmail account, directly the username and password is correct means it leads to your inbox. Inside your Gmail account, either you can move your unread mails or read mails or important mails to the corresponding labels, and you will be moving from your inbox to the corresponding labels to ensure that whether it is already moved or not. This is process 1, that is from inbox to labels you are moving. From labels to inbox again you are moving, or from labels directly you are moving to some other labels. This is page number 2. After label 2 or some other labels, you are coming back to the inbox. This is page number 3. From inbox you are selecting all the mails which is not at all required and deleting it. So deleted mails will be moved to trash. Again you are moving to trash. This is page number 4. In trash you are selecting all the mails already which is there. What else the mails you are deleted, it will be in trash, and then you are selecting all the mails and deleting, or empty the trash, you are clicking on it. Already you moved from inbox to label 1 folder, label 2 folder, then again inbox, and again you move to trash now. Nearly around 4 or 5 pages you moved. Again, if you want to move to some other pages also, you can move. For example, as of now, all the 4 or 5 pages what you have traversed, your username, say call it as X is your username, and with that X username you traversed among all the web pages in your Gmail account, and if you are signing out, until you sign out, the same username will be maintained across all the pages. This is said to be as session. Now you read this point again, 4th sentence, that is, it is most frequently used implicit object which is used for storing the user data to make available on other JSP pages until the user session is active. When the user session is active, until I sign out or log out. That means not sign out, until I log out, sorry. And until once I logged in and until I log out, that session will be maintained. For until all the pages I am going on traversing, my username has to be kept uniquely or kept commonly among all the pages. This is what we call it as session. Then application. This is used for getting application wide initialization parameters and to maintain useful data across whole JSP application. This is very important object called as application. That is, this is used for getting application wide initialization parameters. For example, as already we stated, if you are creating any application and that application consists of 10 web pages, then if you want to initialize a variable and that initialized variable has to be processed among all the pages, we can use this object. Or else, not only the initialized parameters, some common parameters will be there, and whereas the earlier object what we discussed is session, which is available on other pages, either it may be 1 or 2 or else among, at that you can define it, whereas this application object is responsible for maintaining the variables value across the entire JSP application. For example, a web application consists of 100 pages. All the 100 pages, some variable, the user data, user variable name has to be maintained. For those we will be using application. Apart from that, there are some pages which has to maintain some variables. In those scenarios you can maintain session, whereas the session is the time elapsed between login and logout, right? You got clear? Now moving to the next object called as 6th object called as exception. This implicit object is used for exception handling. That is, whenever the errors occurs, that is runtime errors, we call it as exception, and that too during those scenarios this object plays a major role. In here we need to point out one, or we need to concentrate one fact such that this object is only available to the JSP pages where or which has is error page is set to true. Here, see here, already we JSP directives and tag libraries, we saw it here. Here the much more thing important has to be noted down is error page. If this is error page is set to true, then only the corresponding exception implicit object, this exception object is available to the corresponding JSP pages. Well, moving to the next object called as page. This page implicit object is reference to the current servlet instance. This, or else very easily you can remember that the corresponding this keyword is used to refer to the corresponding servlet which is being active. Always it refers to the current servlet instance, right? That is converted servlet generated during translation phase from a JSP page. That is, the page has to be processed and it has to be converted into servlet for further processing. In those scenarios, this page always refers to the current page. We can simply use this in place of it, right? Moving to the next object called as 8th, page context. Page context. It is used for accessing page, request, application and session attributes. This page context is mainly used for accessing the page called as current page or whatever the other page relevant to it, then request object, then the third application object, and fourth one is session attributes. That is, for example, if you are where in online transactions, either online railway ticket booking or online bus ticket booking, or when anywhere else, wherever you are checking for working with online transactions exclusively which needs more security, there they will disable the back button or back refresh button. In those scenarios, this page context plays a major role. That is, a request object has to be worked on it. From the request, it has to process the data, then the current page references has to be done, then your username has to be accessed throughout the application, and the session also has to be maintained. If you refresh it or if you go back, then the corresponding session attribute which is referred in the current page context will be reset or its value will be lost, such that it will prompt you to go for re-login again. So to provide more security, unfortunately due to some other reasons, if you are in a position to leave in between the transactions, if somebody is coming and accessing on it, so the security breach will be there. To avoid all those factors, by considering all those factors, they incorporated this page context in such a manner to provide more security. That is, it is used for mainly accessing the current page, followed by always, as we stated, that the page object is responsible for referring to the current servlet instance, right? The current page which has the request, application and also has the session attributes. Moving to the last object called as config, where this config, this is a servlet configuration object mainly used for accessing the configuration details such as servlet context, name of the servlet, configuration parameters such as when it is being initialized or what is the name of the servlet, accordingly what else the servlet other pages it has to deal with, either the exception it can handle the pages, the current page is having the capacity of processing the exception or not, right? These are the 9 implicit objects available in JSP. To summarize, just we'll be dealing a very short recall of those objects. Out is responsible for writing the content to the client. Request mainly is used to get the data on the JSP page which is entered by the user, that is either from the client side. From the client side to the server side, the data has to be fetched. For that, the request object. Response, third one, response. This is mainly used by the server. It is mainly used by the server to send the data to the client through the browser. Then session, the fourth object, session, it is mainly used for storing the user data. The session one, fourth one, it is mainly used for storing the user data such that it will be available on other JSP pages till up to what it will be available until the user session is active. The fifth application, the fifth object, implicit object called as application. This is mainly used for making the variables value or accessing the variables value can be accessible throughout the application, and also its corresponding and along with its corresponding initialization parameters or initialization variables. The sixth object called as exception. Mainly this implicit object called as exception is used for displaying the error messages, and that too this is only applicable only for the JSP pages where that is error page is true, is set as true. Then the seventh one called as page, this is always it refers to the current servlet instance. Always it refers to the current servlet instance. That how we can refer it by using this keyword. The next one is page context. It is mainly used for accessing the current page, then request, then application, and also as well as session attributes. Then the last implicit object called as config. This is mainly used for fetching the details such as servlet context, servlet name, and configuration parameters. Thank you. In the forthcoming lecture series, we will be dealing with how the beans are used in JSP pages. Thank you.